Hello and welcome back to the Bacon Bites. My name is Seth Bacon and today we're going to review personal options. So everybody that logs into Dynamics 365 has the ability to change their user experience. It's important to have your unique user experience because the way I interact with Dynamics 365 is going to be different than the person next to me. One of the ways we can do that is through personal options. And so when we go up to the cog up here, we can go ahead and click that and go to options. What this is going to do is it's going to bring up, as you see, my personal options. So I can go ahead and change my default pane. So if I want to go ahead and change this from sales, the sales dashboard, which is default based on my user role. So we can set things based on user roles. I can go ahead and say, okay, actually I work in the service department and I want to see the service dashboard when I log in. Or maybe I want to see specifically cases. Or if it's field service, I can go ahead and say, okay, well, I'm a field service scheduler, so I can change that to the schedule board. So that's what happens when I log in. Immediately, it'll go to my schedule board. Or if I click the home button, it'll go there. So different ways that we can set that. Next one you see here is records per page. Now, when we're looking at a long list of records, what we can do is change that from 50 records to 250. So we can change that so that way we are loading more records at a time. This is very beneficial if you're often looking at a long list of information, whether it's cases or leads or opportunities. So this also goes into the advanced find. The other thing that's going to impact the advanced find is this one right here. So we can change it from the advanced find mode to simple, which is just going to show us very briefly, okay, we can change it from option A to option B, or what we can do is do detailed. And we'll see this later on, how that's going to impact it when we're doing an advanced find. Next thing we can do is what's my personal time zone. This has a direct impact on user experience, especially when you're planning events. So if I'm planning an event and it's across the country over in the Eastern time zone as opposed to the Pacific time zone, that's going to have an impact on the way I view data and the way I interact with the data. And so we're going to look at fields, how they can be time zone independent or user local. And so it's going to reflect off of that. But that's important to make sure that people have this set up correctly. So keep in mind that your Dynamics 365 is not coming from your system time zone. So if you fly to the East Coast and your system automatically updates to the East Coast, but your time zone in Dynamics 365 won't. So just be mindful of that as you're traveling around. The next one you see here is currency. So we can go ahead and set default currency. So if I'm typically working in USD, I can be able to set that to US dollars, or if I'm working in pesos, or if I'm working in pounds, I can go ahead and set that here. So that way my default can be very specific as opposed to maybe what is the organizational default currency if my organization is typically based out of another country or using another currency. Next, you see that ability to have, it supports high contrast settings. So visually, it'll improve my experience if I need to have high contrast settings. And then also default country and region. Again, there's a system setting that works this, but you can also set this at a personal in case as a system, the way I interact with the system is different than the majority of the individuals. Other things you see here is the configure relationship assistant. We're going to talk about that in another episode. So if you want to go ahead and view your personal information, that's going to bring up your record in the system, so your user record. Synchronization, this is how your data in Dynamics 365 is going to sync with your Exchange. And so again, we're going to talk about a couple of episodes focused on what is Outlook and Exchange and Dynamics 365. How do all those play together? And so we'll come back to these and review the filters. Activities. So when I'm looking at a calendar, do I want it to default to day? Do I want it to default to week or month? What does that look like? And as far as my default work hours, again, this isn't coming from Exchange, so be mindful of that if you set it there. But you can go ahead and have a start time and an end time. And if you're doing things like scheduling, that's important. Next is formats. So when we're looking at formats, we can go ahead and say, okay, I want to use the defaults for the United States, for English United States. If I work in a different location, then our normal system is I can go ahead and set that so that way it's consistent to what I expect to see. You can also set that and customize that. So you can customize that here. Here we see the different regional options. So I can go ahead and change the decimal symbol to be different. I can change the digital grouping symbol. So typically in the US, it's a comma, as well as what do I want to see the negative number format. So if I want to see it in brackets and parentheses, I can see that there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that back. We can also change the way currency is formatted. So whether the symbol is at the beginning of the number or at the end of the number, as well as the format, again, the negative currency format, which can be different than the whole number format. So that's here we have numbers, here we have currency, and so we can see those differences. So we're going to go ahead and cancel out of that and go back to the personal options. Here we have email templates. So again, you can have email templates that are across the system that everybody can use, or also you can have personal templates, email templates. So if it's something I continually email out, it's something I can go ahead and set up so that way it makes my job easier. My user experience gets improved at that point as well. Next is email signatures. Email signatures allow us to go ahead and set up different default signatures that we can use across the system. So again, you typically think of this in Outlook and Exchange, where I go ahead and set, okay, this is what I want my signature to be with my logo and such. We can go ahead and set that up here, and we can have different sets of personal signatures that can be used. And again, this is at the personal level. This isn't at a system level. And we can use those in emails. And we'll see that later on, how to set those up and configure that as well. Next, we see emails. And so when we talk about emails, this is my personal settings for the emails that are coming out of Dynamics 365. It's important to remember that even though Dynamics 365 can be connected to your Exchange, these are independent of that. And so one of the options you see here is allow other Microsoft Dynamics 365 users to send on your behalf. And there's times where that makes sense based on your organization and based on the way your business process flow goes. There's other times that you don't want that to happen, because if you can imagine, if your CEO had this checked, this allows other people to send emails coming out of Dynamics 365 that go through Exchange and then get sent to individuals outside the organization. So it's important to understand who has this checked, why they have it checked, and you'll notice here that it defaults not being checked. So somebody has to go in there and actively click it to be enabled for other people to send on their behalf. And it doesn't currently have a way to restrict, okay, it's okay if the system sends it out from the IT department or if it sends it out from this specific group of people. This is sort of an all or nothing thing. So just something you want to keep in mind and something you want to be very aware of. The next couple of options here, you'll see what information do we want to have tracked. So again, we can have it automatically track all messages. We can have it track in responses to email. So I email out of the system and I get a response from it. Let's go ahead and track that automatically. Or do I want it to automatically track things from leads and contacts and accounts? And so maybe that makes sense. As well as email messages from Dynamics 365 records that have email enabled. So again, specifically if I have email enabled for contacts, being able to track that automatically. We're going to go ahead and leave it as email messages in response to Dynamics 365. And that's what we typically see. We typically don't want it to track all emails. Again, that's what Exchange is for. If you need to keep that repository of records, you typically keep that in Exchange and track it there. There is an option to configure folder tracking. So we can go ahead and track at the folder level. We can create a folder and all the emails that get placed in that folder will be tracked there. And so we can look at that, and we'll look at that later. We can have it automatically create records in Dynamics 365 for us. And we can go ahead and say, okay, when we track an email, go ahead and create that a contact for us if it doesn't exist already. The last thing here you see is you can go ahead and view your mailbox. And so I can quickly jump to that, and we'll look again at mailboxes and Exchange and Outlook and such. Here we have the option to go ahead and notify Microsoft if we have a web application error. And this allows us to go ahead and send them information so that way they can improve the user experience at a browser level. And so we can go ahead and do that. A lot of times people will start getting these pop-up boxes because something's different, because you're using Chrome on Mac like I am today, or you're using Edge or something like that. And even though it's a supported browser, or maybe you're using an unsupported browser and you reach one of these errors. And so we can go ahead and notify Microsoft of what happened in the different web applications. And so that way they can get generic information about it. So a lot of times people will get these pop-up boxes and it's annoying. And so what we typically encourage people to do is talk to their IT department, understand whether they want to go ahead and send those notifications automatically, or the other option is go ahead and send it never. Because it defaults to ask permission to send the email, a lot of times in a new implementation, new users will get in here and they'll see these pop-up boxes and they think it's broken. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to never. But again, check with your IT department to determine if we want to go ahead and send this information or if we don't want to send it. Either one of these two last options is going to improve the user experience because it's not going to prompt the user to send the message. And again, we can set that at a system level so that way everybody, when they create a new user, we don't have to go in there and manually do this. The last option here is languages. I can also change the user interface language, and currently you see that it's only English because, again, at a system level, we haven't set up different languages. And so if we had that set up, then we could also see the different languages for the user interface as well as for the help language. So that's personal options. It's a great way to improve the user experience. What you notice here, it's going to rerun, it's going to refresh this page, and it's going to apply it. All those different personal options that I just saved. As you notice here, as the page refreshed, it went ahead and dropped us on the schedule board for field service that we had told it to be the default. Hopefully this was a great episode. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you're able to go back and improve the user experience. Again, remember, personal options really are the individuals that are logged into the system. Like I mentioned earlier in the episode, there are tools out there like the XRM Toolbox with the user settings plugin that's going to allow you to change all of the user settings all at one time as a system administrator. That can be a very powerful tool. It can be great to use. The other thing I would encourage you to do is review our episode on system settings. We're going to review the settings that you can set as a system administrator that are going to go throughout the system. So as new users are added, we don't have to manually go through and change this each time. So that's personal options. Very quick, very easy to access, and hopefully you learned something today. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button so that we know you liked it, and hit subscribe so you can receive more content like this. We'd love to hear from you. Please put comments down below in the comment section or reach out to us on Twitter at The Bacon Bites or on our website at thebaconbites.com. We look forward to catching you next time.